Welcome back to Movie Beings, the director series Wes Anderson. If you have watched the first episode of the series, you know that he started his directorial debut with Bottle Rocket on a budget of $5 million. 1 year later, in 1998, Rushmore was released, and 3 years after that, in 2001, The Royal Tenenbaums. These two movies are two of the biggest milestones in his career, in our opinions. And in today's episode, we will dissect them and try to figure out why they are as big as they are.
Beings? Beings.
The first movie that we're going to jump in is Rushmore. I think it's our favorite out of the two.
Out of the three movies we've watched so far,
yeah,
I would say this one's been my favorite. Yes.
Awesome. So the movie was released in 1998 on a budget of $10 million, and it did relatively well at the box office. It's got $19.1 million worldwide, and 17.1 of them is from the US. So it did a lot better than a lot of the blockbusters these days. Do you want to give us a quick movie recap?
So it's based on the character Max.
I'm sorry, did someone say my name?
Who is a student at Rushmore, as you gather from the title. And his whole life is Rushmore, essentially. And he does tons of activities, and that's all he's worried about. He isn't worried about the studying. Then one day the principal calls him out and says, mate, you're shit. Your test scores are low. You need to bump them up or else we're kicking you out. He's like, what? You can't do this. Didn't you see my amazing play I wrote? You can't kick me out.
Yep.
He's like, study, get better or else we're kicking you out.
Yeah.
So he literally tries to come up with any kind of plan to do this apart from studying.
Yes.
Because I remember he keeps talking. He's like, why don't you study? He's like, why would I do that? And then through this time, he also meets
Miss Cross.
Miss Cross,
Yeah.
the teacher.
And he fell in love with her.
Fell in love with her straight away because he found a book that she had written in. And then also met another friend as well.
Yeah, Mr. Bloom.
Mr. Bloom.
The industrialist, played by Bill Murray.
And then they kind of get into some weird love triangle. And during this time, he finally gets kicked out because he doesn't get grades any better.
Yeah.
And he gets sent to a public school.
Yeah. In Cleveland.
So great place to go. And during all this time, Bill Murray gets together with the teacher, and it really pisses him off. And then they have this kind of whole fight between them, which is insane.
Yeah.
And then they figure it out. It's like, hey, why are we doing this? And then the teacher's even like, I don't really like either of you that much.
But yeah, so I think this is a very charming movie, and I think it's one of the cult classic. During one of our conversations, I mentioned that this movie was safe in the United States National Film Registry because of the significance in the culture and historical and aesthetic. And yeah, let's jump into why we like this movie in the first place. What was your first impression of Rushmore?
I was a bit like, I don't even know how to explain it because it is such a weird story. I guess like a normal like school life. Like I get the idea of like not really wanting to study and then like focusing all your time on extra activities. But I remember going to high school, we never really, well, I know I never really cared about other extra, like we never had like tons of clubs or tons of, I know we had sports teams and stuff, but nothing like they did here. Like it seemed like there was so many different things. And also falling in love with the teacher. I'm like, I could understand the boys are just like, oh, look at how attractive he is. But he's like, no, I'm going to try and make her fall in love with me and all the stuff he does, which is insane.
Yes.
But I do think it all kind of adds up quite well. Because I do think it is a bit like a naivety from his point.
Yeah.
Because she, like the whole time, she's like, yeah, this isn't going to happen. I don't know what you think is going to happen, but it's not happening the whole time. Yeah. And then even when like Bill Murray, his mate, and he's just like, it's insane how because he likes his speech once. And it's just like, he has this speech at like, is it church or their hall?
Yeah.
And he stands up and claps. And I'm like, this is crazy. And every other kid's just like, what is this?
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, I really liked your speech. And he's like, oh, thanks. You must be a really smart kid. And then the principal's like, nah, he's like our stupidest kid we have here. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But I just think the dynamic between those three, like considering what like the story's based around, is like really good.
Yeah. And one of my first impression about the movie is how theatrical it is. You know, like during the different segments, they have like the curtains. Like November, December, September, things like that. And I think that it's like a big play on the silver screen.
Because that's like the Max's kind of thing, right? He's like, he wants to write plays, right?
Yes. And when I dig into the movie, I learned that Well, one of the things I noticed on this movie is Owen Wilson is not in this.
Yeah, exactly. Not in it, but wrote it.
Yes, so he co-wrote this movie with Wes Anderson, and the character of Max Fisher is a combination of their personalities and histories. Guess who fell in love with an older lady?
Who?
Owen Wilson fell in love with an older lady. So
Of
he got
course.
expelled from his high school because he struggled academically, and he fell in love with an older woman. The other aspect that Wes Anderson contributed was the fact that the character likes the right place, and Wes Anderson said, at least Max is not shy. He was really shy during his high school time, and this is where Owen Wilson ambitious characteristic comes in. And I think it's a very fun combination because in this case, when you fall in love with an older woman, you would hope that you have the maturity to realize that this is something that might not happen.
Yeah.
But because you are so ambitious, you want to make it happen.
It's like, I can. This can probably happen.
Yeah, I mean, like I have made all the other thing happen. I started all these clubs. I've shown all these activities. Making a woman fall in love with me is piece of cake.
Because that's what's crazy. Like the first start is like it's like a little montage of all these clubs.
I love that montage. This is one of my favorite things about this movie.
So many different clubs that he's created. I'm like, I don't know how he has time to write plays.
Yeah.
Like, this is insane. Because another club is like obviously the plays.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it was pretty like that's like the other part of this film is like, oh, he writes really good plays, and he thinks that like makes him someone important, which kind of backfires on him quite a lot throughout the film.
Yeah.
But like you said, he has all this ambition to like do these things, and he thinks like he gets to know her, and it's like, oh, what does she like? She figures out he likes Latin. Latin's about to get kicked out of the school.
Yeah.
So he gets a huge petition to get Latin back into school.
Yeah.
And then he goes back to it's like, oh look, Latin's not going anywhere. I saved it. And then when he's in there, she noticed she has the aquarium. So he's like, oh, I'm going to go to my mate and ask him who's rich, who's somehow he's like, hey, can I have like $25,000 for an aquarium?
Yeah.
And he's like,
I'll give you $5,000.
yeah, no, what? I thought it was 15. I thought it was even less than that.
Yeah, like $1,500.
And he just writes him a check and gives it to him. I'm like, bloody hell, I would give him nothing. I'm like, mate, go dig a pond or something. Leave me out of this.
But I would say, like, this comparing to Bottle Rocket, this has like a very distinctive storytelling style that we learn from Wes Anderson. Like all the set pieces and all the events are a bit wacky, are a bit weird.
Bit out of place.
Yes.
Because that's what I find really enjoyable, even about both of these films. Kind of a very
Offbeat.
single idea, very simple, but it's very offbeat about how it's projected or comes across.
Yeah.
Like so many... Like, I talked to you, I think it was my other mate I was talking to about Rushmore because I'm like, oh, this is crazy. But these adults give this kid too much leeway. Let him get away with so much shit until it all like eventually backfires. I'm like, I feel like if I was a 15-year-old, went to like a business owner who's worth a lot of money and be like, hey, I've got an idea for this school. Would you mind giving me like $1,000 or like $20,000? I feel like they'd kick me out. I'm not seeing you. Don't come back here ever again.
Yes.
Like it's insane.
No, I love that. And during one of the interviews, Wes Anderson mentioned that Owen Wilson and he were purposely creating this kind of exaggerated reality for the movie. And this is like, as I mentioned before, it's like a play where everything is a bit exaggerated. Like, oh,
that's what it's
he
like
can do
to
a lot
him,
of things.
right? That's how he kind of plays out things.
Yeah.
Because he has. Oh, it's not really a mate. He has like that kid that he's like tutoring or looking after. But it's lent across that he has a very attractive mother and that he's like trying to like make a move on her or something.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because the other kids are like, yeah, you're not going to do anything with her. And it's like, oh, if I would have made out with her by now or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Very much like teenage boy kind of thing. That's just like you're talking big when you don't really mean any of it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God. That's what I didn't get. I'm like, why is he doing this shit? It's like, because they were like decent friends. He was friends with the younger boy, but that backfired on him as well anyway.
And I think this is where his character becomes really, really intriguing because he's not a perfect
he's far
protagonist,
from it.
right?
He lies all the time.
Yeah.
Even about like his dad. He calls him what's he call him?
A neurosurgeon. Yeah.
And then because early in the film we don't meet his dad till a little bit later till he like actually says, hey, you're going to get kicked out if you don't get better grades. And he's in like a hairdresser. He's like, oh, can you show me the hair at the back? Cool. And then he's like, oh, thanks for that, Dad. I'm like, what?
yeah.
You're like, it reveals to you in a way because he doesn't tell you the character. It's just in the world, which is kind of cool in itself. But it's funny that his dad's a hairdresser.
Out of this movie, like there are so many aspects that I really enjoy. Like the plot twist or the revelation of different details. As I mentioned, the first montage is one of my favorites. The second thing that I really like is the dialogues. Like, there are so many quotes from this movie
But some of it feels very strange as well.
and probably because of that, they are so strange, and that's why it becomes so viral worthy nowadays, right? If you put that on, it's like, oh, this doesn't sound like anything I've heard before. Like I guess one of the classic one is like, I say Latin. Yeah. Like, what did you ever do? Like when I heard it for the first time, I had no idea what he meant. But when I watched that sequence, it's like, it kind of makes sense. Yeah. And do you have a favorite line? Do you have a favorite scene or segments?
Well, my favourite scene is when Bill Murray is having his party for his twins and he's sitting by the pool with a cigarette in his mouth, like half hanging out. And he's just getting golf balls and he's just plopping them into the pool for no apparent reason. The kids are like opening presents, like staring at him. Another kid like walks like right in front of him and he's just still like popping golf balls over into the pool for no reason. Because I think it's just showing how disillusioned with his life he kind of is. And that hanging out with Max kind of gives him this outlet. Max thinks he thinks the world of him, and he's like, all these ideas he has, he's like, oh yeah, sure, this sounds like a great idea, I'll just go along with this 15-year-old.
And you know, like, this dynamic really reminds me of the dynamic between the two friends in Bottle Rocket. You know, we talked about at the end of the movie when he has another plan to rob this place. And our main character looked at like the gardener in the movie, and he was intrigued by all the adventures that his friend is bringing. I think the dynamic is very similar. Like Mr. Bloom, he is a middle-aged industrialist. He's not very happy with his life. He has this annoying twin that goes to like this expensive school. And during the first speech, he was saying like, if you are from middle class family, don't let these rich people
kids step on you. You eat them. It's like, exactly. You get them.
Yeah, but then, you know, his kids are the rich kids.
They're the rich kids.
So, you know, it's a bit ironic in that sense. And yeah, I think the dynamic between Mr. Bloom and Max is really cool. And they are a bit like friends. It's not like father and...
No. They are definitely like friends. But that's why it's great when it gets to like the love triangle, when he goes over there one day and is like talking to her. He's like, oh, does Max have anything planned for us or anything? And she's like, no, I don't think so. I think tomorrow we're meant to do something. Oh, okay. And then I just kind of having this odd conversation because there's I guess I'll see you tomorrow. And she's like, oh, I'm having some snacks. She's like eating carrot or something. Like, would you like one? She's like, sure. It's like starts eating this carrot. I'm like, what is going on here?
Yes, but I think this is another aspect that makes this movie so great. Is it's kind of plays with your expectation a little bit, because it's very hard for you to predict what happens next. Like even now, when I try to tell the story back to the people who haven't seen it, I'm having a hard time because like the details in the movies are so offbeat and unexpected in a way. Another thing that I really like, but this is a bit outside of the movie, when we were talking about how the movie was being produced. When they wrote the script, they really wanted to get Bill Murray to play Mr. Bloom. But of course, during this time, Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson are still a bit unknown. They got Bottle Rocket. It was the only film they have on their resume. But luckily, Bill Murray's agent was a big fan of Bottle Rocket. So he pushes the script to Bill Murray and says, hey, you have to read the script from this director. He's really good. And Bill Murray fell in love with the movie. So he agreed to do the movie for free in the beginning. And of course, you know, Wes Anderson was like, oh, you know, like what about we pay you like a full-time employee with overtime, with breaks times and things like that. At the end, Bill Murray got paid like $9,000 for this movie out of the $10 million budget that he got from Walt Disney. So yeah, this is one of the fun details outside the movies I really want to bring up, because it seems like Bill Murray was allowed a lot of improvisation during the production. Did you notice any kind of weird acting?
Weird acting, but very Bill Murray. Like,
yeah,
there was a lot of points where it's like, oh, that's definitely just a Bill Murray kind of doing what he like, kind of like what he wants to do. Because even I don't know if that whole pool scene's amazing when he even gets up and does like on the diving board, and he's still got like the cigarette hanging out of his mouth. He has like Budweiser shorts, like pool shorts on, and I'm like, Oh my gosh.
Apparently, the interaction that he has with the twins in the movies are all improvisation. He really did find the twins annoying.
It does seem like Bill Murray. What are these kids doing?
Another thing that that I want to bring up is the question of why people like this movie so much. You know, like I watched it for the first time only a few weeks back. What do you think was the reason why people like this movie so much?
I think it's got a lot of charm. Like, I think all of the main characters are kind of like lovable or like enjoyable in their own way, and kind of hits on like a lot of different things. Like, you got a young teenager, like a young adult just starting out like in her life, even though she's gone through, she recently has deceased partner, and then like the older man, like you said, he's like a midlife crisis, kind of like in the dregs of it all, and it's just like trying to find something. I just feel like it does have a good range of characters that can like appeal to someone, or even gone through that experience, because like they both fall in love with this girl, right? Which it's like insane to begin with, because it's just like she tries to shut him down so many times, but he's just lost in it.
Yeah.
Because the final straw, when he gets kicked out of the school, he's like, he's going to make this aquarium, and starts like cutting down trees and stuff. And it's in the ball, it's like the baseball pitch.
Yeah.
And the coach is like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm just going to put this here. He's like, what about the base? He's like, I think we're going to move that over a little bit. Like, he's like, oh, I'm just doing what I'm doing. Yeah. Trying to get my goal of making her fall in love with me. And even like after Bill Murray has the affair and like kind of breaks off, he like fakes a car accident out the front, and he like got fake blood. He climbs up a ladder into a window when it's raining. And he's like, oh, look, I've just been hit. And like, why? He's got a ladder. He's climbed up after being hit by a car. Yeah. Like, oh my God. But it's just like the quirkiness, the like charm. Yeah. You know, it's just, and I do think there's a very like good through line through the movie. It's easier to follow. Yeah. Things do happen in a good sequence. Yeah. And yeah, I do think it has a lot going for it. Yeah. Like compared to Bottle Rocket, if we're going off that.
Yeah. And I would say another aspect that I really like about this movie, and I think it's why it's so popular, is the characters themselves. I think Max Fisher is one of the best characters that Wes Anderson and Owen Wilson created. This is like a very common coming of age story, but Max Fisher has a lot of relatable traits. He's very ambitious. He's struggling academically, and he tried to make up for it in his own ways, like joining a lot of extracurriculars activities. He's a teenager, so he falls in love, you know, and he thinks that love is like the biggest goal in his life at that stage.
Or he thinks about it as well, because he does mention, he's like, oh, a lot of boys are talking about girls and stuff, and he's like, oh, that's something I should focus on as well, right? Mm-hmm. But he also sells himself a lot. Like, he does lie a lot. Yeah. Like about his father and about like his own achievements and stuff. Like, he does try to amp himself up. Yeah. Like, he's a bit better than he is when he's not, you know.
And I think that's what makes his character so down to earth and multidimensional, because at the end of the day, you know, we established that he's not a perfect character. He lies all the time. But I think it stems from his insecurities or from his background. Because and I think this is something that a lot of people relate to, when you go to a prestigious school and you're from like a middle class family, obviously you
or
have
even a bit lower, even you could
I would say that
lower end.
Yeah.
Because it's just his father, right? His mother passed away.
Yeah.
And he got in there on a scholarship as well. So, you know.
Yeah.
Which I'm surprised he didn't try. I love the idea that he just didn't even try to study. He's just like, no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing about him is he's trying to break out of the socio-economic mold that he was born into. And I think the motivation that he has is that what makes him so relatable, because all of us always strive to become something better than ourselves. And obviously, in his case, his execution might be a bit better, but what else, you know, could he have done? Well, he could have studied a bit more.
Yeah, well, because that's why I wanted to say at Rushmore, right? Because he had all this access to everything, right? He had such great access to do what he wanted. And that's what he didn't want to get taken away. Because what did he say? He's like, oh, could I do like a junior or a senior year? He wanted to stay an extra year or whatever.
Like extra credits or something like that.
Yeah, and I'm like, they're like, no.
Oh,
when
we don't do that yet.
Yeah.
We don't do that yet.
Yeah, because he's like, I want to stay forever, essentially.
Yeah. I think his character is so multi-dimensional, and you know, if you just look at any interaction that he has, you can clearly see that his motivation is from a very selfish place, but it's very understandable selfish place. Because, as I mentioned before, you know, like he knows where his dad is coming from, and he doesn't want to relate himself to that. And in the second half of the movie, after he got expelled, you could see that, you know, like he can
gave
easily
up. He gave up a bit.
Yeah, and he could easily fit back into that mold.
Because he tries to drop out of high school, doesn't he, to work with his dad. He goes, he works at the barber for a little bit.
Yeah,
and that's great as well. And he's like sweeping up and stuff, and like helping with the haircuts. But he like just given up because he's like, Rushmore was my everything. Because it wasn't even about like still doing plays. Well, that's what he gets back to, right? But that was like his whole thing. He's like, well, I'm out of Rushmore. What's the point? Might as well be a hairdresser like my dad.
Yeah. And I think that was a really good development on his arc, because at the end of the day, it plays another dimension for him as well. I think when he was young, like you need to have like an ideal goal for you to reach. For him, it was the high school, the Rushmore. And I think in a way, he got his goal. He got the influence that he wanted, but then he kind of lost it. And then he realized that there are other things that he can achieve as well. And I think that's when the development of his character comes in. And, you know, like basically it's more like an underdog story from the beginning.
Like a little bit, but it is like put on himself as well. Like, you know, he's the reason he fails, right? It isn't like an outside force that like forces him out of a situation. He does a lot of the bad stuff himself. He gets him into his own shit. Yeah. So it's like, I think it is like the learning for him to deal kind of with reality a bit, right? Yeah. Like trying to fall in love with the teacher. Like that ain't happening. Trying to stay at school longer, or even being at school without doing what you're there for school to begin with. Yeah. You know, lying about everything that happens, like pretending the mother gave him a hand job, saying your father is better than what he is, you know, all these things he feels like he needs to lie about to appear cooler, more secure, more, you know, but it all really doesn't matter, because when he goes to Cleveland, I still love when he gets his first test and it's like a C- or whatever, and he's just like, oh, and then he's just like, yeah, that's all right, you know, they don't care. And it's great. And even when he tries to start clubs there, like he's like, he has his whole speech and he's like, I'm going to definitely try to start a fencing club, guys. I noticed we haven't got one. And everyone was just like, does not give a shit.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of different aspects about this movie that we really enjoy. But I want to mention the casting phase. When the movie got a green light from the studio, Wes Anderson did consider Macaulay Culkin to play Max Fisher. So Macaulay Culkin was 17 at the time, and he was just came off from his fame from the Home Alone franchise. How would you feel about this casting choice?
Would have been interesting, but like we've said before, after you've watched this movie, Jason seems like a great choice. Like he seems perfect for the role. Yeah. Which it might have been interesting for the Macaulay Culkin, just because like to give him that movie after, you know, even though this is still like, you know, a younger teen film. Well, that's not really a teen film, is it? Like some of the stuff in it, but you know, it's just outside of the like him being that child star. But yeah, who knows? But yeah, I do think Jason was a good choice. Like I think so. After watching it, it's like I couldn't imagine anyone else doing it.
I agree, and I heard the story of him coming to the audition in the full Rushmore blazer with a made-up Rushmore patch. I think that's a level of commitment that that he had for the movie. And after this movie, both Bill Murray and Jason Schwartzman appear in like 6 other projects with Wes Anderson.
I wonder why. But it's just like showing that commitment, right? Because it's like, especially in film, when you have a vision for something, you want someone that's also on board. Because a lot of the bad films we end up watching, it's because it's mostly for a paycheck. They're not really in on it. And even like what the script is, maybe it isn't that great anyway. So like there's no buy-in, right? Even though this, like you said, it only had a small budget really, even for like late early 90s. Yeah. And even he got lucky that Bill Murray didn't, because I'm sure Bill Murray could have easily been like, oh yeah, but I want like $5 million or whatever he would have been asking for back then. Yeah. So it's just like a lot of things going right, which is kind of crazy, because I do feel like this is like the launch pad for Wes Anderson, right? This isn't like, even for back then, this isn't like a huge success, but it's just a success that it made money. Yeah. and that it's like, oh, there's something here, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I think we spoke about this before. There are so many different directors, but like when you look at a movie, you would know distinctively this is Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I think a lot of actors and artists, they realize that, and that's why they want to be part of that project.
They can tell. Yeah, exactly.
I think you mentioned we were talking about the pay cut and things like that as well. During the casting of this movie, when Jason Schwartzman was cast, he spent a whole day with Wes Anderson discussing the characters, the hand gestures, the the dialogues, things like that. And I think you mentioned that, you know, the directors, they like to work with the people that they work well with. So this is like, and now, you know, we see them in different projects. The latest one is Asteroid City. We're gonna see Jason Schwartzman in that again.
He's in that again. Yeah, exactly.
What don't you like about this movie?
I guess like the awkwardness a bit, but I feel like that's part of it a little bit. And like, there's just so many it's more like little things that like annoy me more than anything. But there's nothing too bad in this that I'm just like, oh, it like turned me off at all. But I think that's like part of it. Like we talked about before, like a bit of the quirkiness and the charm of it. But there's nothing immediately comes to mind. I really enjoyed it, honestly. I thought it was a great film.
I think it's very hard for me to find something that I don't like about this movie, because like each scene is layered with so many different aspects that I really enjoy, like the dialogues, the characters, the acting, the dynamic, and the backstory and the motivations and things like that. And this is a very rewatchable movie as well. You can watch it again and again, and you learn new things. I guess the last thing that we want to discuss is the side characters. You know, like it's famous for Wes Anderson movies. Like there are so many fun side characters. My favorite is the bully.
The bully? The twin?
No, the Irish bully.
Oh, the Irish bully.
Yeah. Magnus Buchan. Magnus. So he did the audition when he was in Ireland, and he was cast straight away. And he's got one of the greatest lines like in the movie. It's like,
why didn't you just piss off, Fisher, you dirty wee skid mark?
Was that Latin?
But yeah, he's because at the end of the movie, he was invited to be part of Max's play. Yeah. And he's like, oh, one of the reasons why I bullied you is because I have always wanted to be part of your play, but you never invited me. And they're like, okay, that's great. And then, you know, he has great acting chops as well, as you would expect. What about you? Do you have a fun side character that you dream about?
Maybe not fun side characters, but like a lot of even though this is just his second film, there's an actor called Kumar who shows up again.
Yeah.
He's a safe cracker in Bottle Rocket, but in this he's like the gardener. Because there's a scene where he's like raking up some leaves, but they're like, the rake's completely broken or something.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God. And we see Luke Wilson, who's like the nurse who dates the teacher like slightly.
Yeah.
And then his other older brother's in it as well, and he's the coach.
Yeah.
He's the coach that he gets kicked off the thing. And there's also another one, I can't remember her name, but she was from the Gilmore Girls, and she's in the starting scene when he's at Cleveland. She's sitting next to him.
Is it Margaret, the new girlfriend? Is it
Alex?
Yeah.
Belfield?
Okay.
She's from Gilmore Girls. You probably know if you saw her. But she's like sitting next to him in the classroom. I remember I was like, what? But obviously that was probably before she was like big. But
yeah, okay.
Just funny seeing like actors and stuff that from other stuff that are like, oh.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have expected them there, but.
Yeah. I think it's great to like the characters that Wes Anderson created. They are like the little Easter eggs throughout his movies, right? Oh, I'm pretty sure I recognize that guy. I'm pretty sure I recognize that guy. Oh, that girl, and things like that.
Like you said, he works with people he likes. So you notice that early on even. This is his second film, and there's like, you know, 4 or 5 people that are like, oh, he was in that last film.
And do you want to talk about the jump from Bottle Rocket to Rushmore? I think you were mentioning something like from Bottle Rocket to Rushmore is like
it feels like a huge jump
level up
like,
for Wes Anderson, isn't it?
You can definitely feel like Bottle Rocket as like a first film. Like it just feels like the ideas are kind of there, but maybe not well executed. Things maybe drag on a bit too much. Maybe the vision for like where he wanted things to go isn't quite there. Where in this, I feel like all the ideas are very well thought out, even though it was like only a year after that movie or whatever. And it's like, all the actors are bought in, you know, you're not worried, like he's, you know, the Owen Wilsons, they were their friends, so they're helping him out and stuff, which is great and stuff, but like getting in like Bill Murray and stuff. Even the actress who plays the teacher, she's great. I feel like she does a great job. And even Jason, he's great as well. So having actors that really, you know, not saying that the Wilsons were bad, but I feel like the 3 main roles in this were amazing. And even like the idea was very thought out, I feel.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like even there's no real lulls. You're like following along fairly well through the whole movie.
Yeah. And if you still remember the conversation that we had about Bottle Rocket is the initial script that he had for the movie was cut down a lot due to the restriction of the budget and the duration. But I think for Rushmore, he had pretty much like a full creative control.
And he had probably a little bit more leeway as well.
Yes.
But it seems great. Like even for a second movie, you'd still think early on it's like, oh, it might be a bit more rough, but it just feels like a great movie, which is crazy to think about for like a second film.
And then he took a 3 years break before he released his next movie in 2001, The Royal Tenenbaums. Now, personally, I think that this movie has the distinctive color palette and the cinematography that we learn and know him so well, like the symmetrical filming, framing, and like the really pale color palette.
Yeah.
Comparing to Rushmore, I think Rushmore has a lot more stronger color palette. Like, there you go. But as you can see, just from the posters themselves, like there are a lot more bright colors in this movie.
And I think that's to do with the characters as well. Because there's a lot of characters in this film, giving them all their distinct look, I feel like matters a lot.
At this point, this movie was his most financially successful movie on a budget of $20 million. So now this budget doubled the previous one. And this movie earned $71.4 million.
Which is kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
Because that's like...
3 times the budget.
Which is like what they look for in the film industry. It's like, okay, if we give him like $20 million, he's probably going to get us money.
Yes. But what was your first impression of this movie?
I thought it was insane.
Yeah.
Like even coming from, I watched Rushmore first. I watched this in order. And then I watched this and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? This is insane. I do think like the underlying themes and story is quite good, but just like all the characters are insane.
Yes.
Or on some like level of insaneness. I do enjoy how it like introduces everything and everybody throughout the film.
Yeah.
But just like there's like a bit of insanity and a bit of weirdness to Rushmore. You can see that a bit, but this, I feel like it takes another step with every character. There's like a few, like I would say, normal people.
Yeah.
But then I feel like after that, like so many levels of insanity.
Yeah. And this movie plays in with the one of the common themes that we find with Wes Anderson movies these days, the dysfunctional family. And this is like a textbook example of like what a dysfunctional family looks like.
It's pretty much like spot on with the whole like father's not really there and the mum does all the work. It's like perfect timing. Like we're probably still in that phase a bit more, but we're generally in a period now that it's like fairly even, and it's not meant to be one person's job over another to look after kids. It's like even. But back then it was just like, even then it's like dad's just like, oh, I'm making money. Mum, you worry about the kids.
Yeah.
But in this movie, it literally shows the mum's like, get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
They're not like divorced, but have been like broken up for a very long time, and she just like why have I forgotten the word? Homeschools them.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, and that is basically the synopsis of this movie. So it's about a family of 3 young geniuses who accomplish so much, but when they get to adult life,
it all comes crashing down.
All came crashing down, and we pretty much just follow the characters on how they deal with all the failures and all the secrets,
or how they don't deal with it. More likely, because that's what I really the thing I enjoyed about this film, because it is. When the title, The Royal Tenenbaums, they nearly could have just called it Royal Tenenbaums, because I do feel like it's a father's story. There's a lot of stuff going on in the film early on, just like a lot of setup and a lot of build up to kind of get to his point of like realizing what he needs to do. Because like early on when we're introduced to him, you're like, oh, he's just like an asshole.
Yeah, he's leaving the kids behind, right?
Because he's living at a hotel and like he doesn't want any contact with the kids, but then he runs out of money.
Yeah.
And he's in the hotel and he's like, shit, I need to find somewhere to live. I'm going to fake being sick.
Yeah.
And then go back and like, hopefully my ex-wife, well, technically wife, but they haven't been together for a long time, will just take me in again.
Yeah.
And the kids.
And I think the story was set out to be like he used that excuse to like mend the relationship between him and the kids and the wife. But I think we found out later that it's just like all a lie as well.
Yeah, that's all a lie as well, which is crazy because So at this point, we like at the start of the movie, we're introduced to all the kids and like all of their talents and geniuses.
Yeah.
So it goes. It's Cash first.
Chaz.
Chaz.
Chaz, Richie, and Margot.
So he's the marketer, like
he's a math genius.
Marketer, run businesses. Richie's the famous tennis player.
Yeah.
And Margot's like a playwright again.
Yes.
And then as they hit adulthood, Kaz loses his wife, passes away, kind of has a bit of a breakdown.
Yeah.
Richie also has a breakdown. He's playing tennis and just loses it and lives on a boat for a year.
Yeah.
And then Margot as well kind of gets married and then kind of loses it a bit as well, but she hadn't written a play in a very long time.
Yeah.
And they've all kind of fallen out of place. And they all kind of end up going home at any different points in the movie because Kaz goes home, he's like, he doesn't feel safe. He's like, I'm coming home, I don't feel safe.
Yeah.
And he's like, I need this, this, and this. And he's like, the mother's like, we don't have any of that here. But he's like, no, we're still here. We're moving in.
Yeah. And I think this is like where the movie magic comes in. This is like a perfect timing in terms of the characters because Royo is coming back because of his sickness. Jazz is coming back because of his delusion.
Yeah.
And Richie is coming back because he's been away for too long and now he's coming back.
because he heard Margot's coming back home.
Yeah.
Because Margot's coming back because he heard the other Kaz was coming home.
Yeah.
So she's like, oh, if he's coming home, I'm coming home.
Yeah.
Because she's just living in her bathroom apparently.
Yeah.
Bill Murray, her husband, is worried. A psychiatrist?
Yes. Yeah.
He's like, why are you in the bathroom all the time?
Gwyneth Paltrow plays a really good character in this. Like the makeup and demeanor is very suicidal, I would say.
Well, I wouldn't say suicidal, but she's very much in line with the kind of dark, ominous kind of character that kind of keeps to herself, doesn't reveal too much, and is like living by her own kind of standard and isn't too worried about what other people think, even though she keeps a lot of secrets. But that's another thing, like you say about her look. I feel like they all have distinct looks.
Yeah.
Because early on, like Richie always dressed in his like tennis outfit. Kaz early on was always dressed in his like suit or his like...
Yeah, the business suit.
But then he changes to like
the red jumpsuit.
The red jumpsuit later. And Margot has that similar thing. She has that like dress she always wears and the big jacket overcoat she always wears.
And
so
the black eyeliner.
The black eyeliner. Like they're all distinct looks.
Yeah. And I think this is where, as I mentioned, it's the aesthetically popular from the Wes Anderson movies. You can recognize the colors, you can recognize the costumes, you can recognize the demeanors from different characters as well. And I would say out of these characters, Margot's character might be the one that doesn't move on from her trauma, because we established from the beginning that she's one of the adopted child, right? And she always feels like she's not part of the family, and up until her adulthood, she still doesn't feel belong in the family. And even when she comes back, the only reason she comes back is because of Richie.
Yeah, who's the one she only cares about, really.
Yeah.
But that's like early on because she runs away, right? And that's how she loses her finger, because she tries to go back to her biological family.
Yes.
And then probably realize, I probably don't want to be out here with these people.
Yeah.
And then but that's her thing. I think that's like her story, is trying to find somewhere to belong, right? Even though, because they put up that her and Richie get along really well. And they have like a relationship, which they're brother and sister, but she's adopted. So that's like another weird relationship he has in this movie. But I do think she does, like, I know we're skipping a bit to the end here, but when her and Richie kind of resolve things between them and say, hey, like maybe we can try have a relationship. But she does recover a bit because she does go back to writing plays again. Because I do love that bit when she's like, oh, she wrote a new play. The reviews were mixed. So it wasn't like another big hit. She's like her last ones, but showing that she's like trying to get back to what she liked.
Let's talk about like your favorite segments and dialogues and scenes in this movie.
One of my favorite bits is when Henry, why have I forgotten his name? The actor.
The Danny Glover.
When he like figures out that he's been lying about having cancer, and he like goes in and confronts him and is like, oh shit.
This is just Tic Tacs.
Yeah, this is just Tic Tacs. He's like, and my wife died of like bowel cancer, and he's like, oh.
And one of my favorite scenes is when Owen Wilson's character, he was having an affair with Margot, and they met.
He's
on
like
the
jumping
bridge.
out of the window, or no? Oh, at the window when they're breaking up.
No. So this is before, there was a secret investigator that her husband hired. So that was revealed very funny because the two of them were on the bridge, and then the camera just pans up into the roof, and then
there he is.
another guy with an umbrella. And during that scene, when the investigator revealed all the secret marriages that Margot had, it's like, and Bill Murray's character was like, yeah, so she smokes.
Yeah, that's like all he took from it, which is great.
But
it's a perfect punchline.
But right after that, Luke Wilson character Richie, he had the whole mental breakdown.
He was already kind of a bit lost, and then this is just like the final nail in the coffin.
So he went to the bathroom, and during this scene, Wes Anderson decided to have a long shot. So he stayed with this character throughout all the shaving, all the cutting hair and things like that. And we got to like the slitting thing. And I think this scene is like a so contrast to all the bright colors that he has throughout the movie, which is like, it's still with me until this day. Do you have another favorite scene?
So eventually, like, he gets kicked out and he goes back to the hotel and he begs the guys for a job. And I love that even when he's getting kicked out, and Kumar, who's like that's not the name that's the actor.
Pagoda.
And he's like helping him move out. And he's just like, oh, thanks for helping me. And he like gets the knives and like stabs him again because he's an assassin that's meant to stab him.
Yeah.
And he's like, why you could just stab me? And I'm like, oh my God.
It's just so out of place.
It's great though. I was just like, he's like, oh, now I'm going to do my job because you're not saving me anymore. You're not, getting me a place to live.
Yes. Another scene that I really like is when they confronted Eli Cash. So Eli Cash is played by Owen Wilson.
Yeah. The drugs.
And they came over to his house and they're like, yeah. I realized I needed help. And then I just jumped out a window and just ran away. It's like,
well, that's what I mean. He jumped out a window before when he was coming out of the house because I assume he was meeting with Margaret.
Yeah.
And the father was like, what are you doing here?
I mean, like, all the characters in the family are just so dysfunctional.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess, again, this is something that I kind of realized that to be the pattern from Wes Anderson movies. He creates really relatable motivations for the characters. Like, just like Rushmore, right? He lies, he cheats because he wants to get out of the socio-economic class. For Bottle Rocket, he wants to have an adventure. In this case, the three children were under a tremendous amount of pressure because they were geniuses, and now they want to break out of that genius. But like, it's super, super hard because that's what brought them the fortune in the first place.
It's even trying to find their own happiness. Like, Kaz isn't like, he's just lost because he's lost his wife. He doesn't know how to deal with his kids. At the start, Royal's like, oh, let him loose and be a bit more free. And Kaz didn't like him because he literally shot him with a BB gun.
Yeah.
For no reason apart from just because he could. But later in the film, when Royal's like realized like, oh shit, I actually felt good about spending time with my family. This is what I just wanted to begin with. And like actually tries to be a good father and like tries to be good, like give him good advice and help him out rather than just doing it for his own benefit, which is nice to see through the film. Cause I thought that was really touching, like later part of the film when he's like reconnecting with his kids and just trying to be a father. Did
you like the decision of him giving his wife the divorce paper at the end, just so that she could remarry?
Yeah, because it's like him finally letting go, because that's like the first thing we see of him in the film. He like, Kuma's character comes to see him and he's like, oh, she's got someone interested. They're thinking about getting married. And he's like, what? And that's when he comes up with the whole plan of like, oh, now I'm going to try and move in there. I'm going to try break this up and like get in his face and make sure it doesn't happen. And then, like, obviously, when he realizes everything, he's like, oh, I should let her be happy. Like, it's not on me,
Yeah.
And, like, gives her the papers and, like, literally, like, yep, you sign him. Here's the guy. This is my guy. He's going to take him off. And he's like, we're done. Yeah, he's like, yeah. When he processes it all, it'll be done. Yeah. It's like, great.
Yeah. And I really like, but this is like a bit of a darker scene of the movie when he had a heart attack and Chas, who was not his favorite.
Yeah.
Richie was his favorite.
Yeah.
But he was with him in the final moments. I think it was a very interesting scene because at the end, during his last moments, like he couldn't choose who he could be with, and Chaz has an opportunity to spend his last moments with the father. Maybe he has a bit of a closure as well. did you remember what he wrote on his tomb?
I did write it down before, but it was great. I'll try to find it.
Yeah. Trying to find it. I think it's quite...
It was quite good. I thought it was quite a touching end for the film.
A few moments later.
Oh, here we go. Died tragically rescuing his family from the wreckage of the destroyed sinking battleship.
Yeah. And I think it encapsulates his character so well. Like at the end, he's still that lying, cheating person, but he did the one or two right things in the end. So it makes his character a bit more redeemable. Another thing that I want to dive a bit deep into is the relationship between Margot and Richie. I think Richie is like one of the most tragic love stories that Wes Anderson has ever had.
It's like very unsettling at the start. Like, what?
Yeah.
But because obviously when you find out later, you're like, oh, Richie's failed at tennis. You're like, you don't really know why. But when they showed a tennis game later and it figured out that that's when Margot got married to Bill Murray's character. And and then he couldn't win a point. He pretty much played the worst tennis of his life because he's like, the woman I love's getting married, even though technically she's been married a lot of other times before, but obviously he didn't know about it. So he was just, it's funny because I don't know how old they would have been, like in the 30s at this point or something, right? Yeah. That this is when it finally like occurs to him that he's like, it's done.
And I really like the scenes where Luke Wilson and Gwyneth Paltrow are on the same screen together. When they first saw each other again after a long time, you know, like all of those slow motions when Margot stepped off the bus a bit late, and Richie was there early, and then all he saw her like he's like walking in slow motion just so that he could get all that memory into his brain. It's great. And I think the scene where they finally got together inside the tent, I think that scene was intense because there are so many things wrong with that.
Just after he got out of the hospital as well, because he literally just broke out. He says he got himself signed out to get out, but it's brutal because he still has all the marks on his arm. And that's when they have like a frank discussion about it. Because it's funny that they never had before, but he's like, yeah, I love you. And she's like, yeah, I love you too. And then they're like, oh, and then it's just... They like, maybe we can do this in secret.
Yeah.
Even though it's like, he even told his father about it, Richie, at that point. So they should have just embraced it at that point. But
I think...
It's not her character, that's the thing.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It's like kind of against what she does. Even though at this point, her marriage is done anyway. Because what does he do before? What's that scene? He's like, they're in the hospital waiting because Richie's in, I assume, in the operation. Yeah. And then... Bill Murray's just like, you got a cigarette? She's like, what? He's like, I know you got it. Just give me a damn cigarette.
Yeah. No, it's just a very weird and dysfunctional. And you could see why like this family is falling apart as we say.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think at the end, you know, I think this is one of the things that we spoke about before in one of the other movies. Like if you want to rebuild a future that you really want, sometimes you have to have the courage to break the lives that you are having. And I think this is like a turning point for all these characters. Like for Richie, for him, the symbol is like him ending his own character. For Margot, she writes plays again. And for Chaz, he has the final moment with his father. I think it's very poetic, and Wes Anderson did a phenomenal job in terms of like the storytelling in this movie. Yeah, but, you know, out of the two movies, I guess we still enjoy Rushmore more.
Yeah, I think they're both good films. And it's not like one's worse than the other. I can see why this one's probably got more popularity. It's got a lot more like named actors in it.
Yeah.
And this is like off-coming Rushmore as well. Yeah. That's probably had built up a little bit of fame for Wes Anderson at this point.
Yeah.
And I think even Owen Wilson at this point might have had a bit more of a name.
Yeah.
And then it's just like going into this film, it just feels like more... you know, quaint that it's like, this is the one that did it. It's like finally put his name in the spotlight a bit more. But it was a very good film.
Yeah.
Like, I do think it's a bit long in some points and like there's a lot of explaining. I do love how it does have the chapter thing and like chapter 7 and then it has like a little summary of what's happening. It's like Kaz is walking down the stairs and the next scene is him just like walking down the stairs. I'm like, oh, that's all really cool and stuff.
Yeah.
But nah, that's even like... It's funny looking back at like a young Ben Stiller with Owen Wilson and thinking like they're chasing each other around in the end scene. Then when he crashes his car into the dog, he nearly kills his kids.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, they're just thinking about Night in the Museum, aren't they? As he's dressed up as like a cowboy and stuff in the whole film. And I'm like, wonder if they thought about that, but
Probably not, but I think that's a
Probably
very
not.
good segue. But yeah, so I'm really excited to continue with this series because I think from his humble beginning, now Wes Anderson's movie really got the momentum and like got all the things that we learned to love over the years.
Because he's developed, you can see his style clearly in his direction and his storytelling. It's all kind of, at this point, it's really cemented already. Even in his third film, you're just like, you can see it all. Because even Rushmore was already there, but here it's like even further, and he's delved in more. He's like, okay, now I can really put in like what I like to do with film.
Yeah, awesome. Are there any things that you'd like to add in these two movies?
I don't know. I feel like we did a decent job. I don't know if there's anything else I'd like to add, but I'll definitely recommend both of these films. If you haven't watched either of these Wes Anderson films, I'd definitely check them out.
Definitely. And we have reached the end of the episode. I hope that you guys enjoy the conversation. Click the subscribe button, click on the bell to get a notification for the latest episodes. And I'm Darren.
And I'm Tim.
And this has been Movie Beings.